Mara, Daughter of the Nile, Chapter 23. This one is titled Capture. 5 minutes later, 2 Syrians in gaudy draperies emerged from the Princess Anani's suite and started for the stair. Down the hall, the guard's sword clattered as he straightened. "Stay! Who's that?" 2 shawled heads turned inquiringly toward him, and there was a vague, sibilant mumble of Babylonian, a shrugging of shoulders. He hesitated, but then settled back against the door. Never mind. Go on, go on." The Syrians padded to the stair and disappeared. A few minutes later, one of them returned alone, let herself quietly into the room, and drew the bolt behind her. At the same moment, Mara was walking beside Sheremi, the weaver, through the main gate of the palace grounds, carrying a basket of linen warp on her head and echoing the Syrian's casual goodnight to the sentry. "By my gosh, Sheremi," he remarked in surprise, "you're a little late, are you not? All Thebes is asleep long since. Who's that with you?" "Only my new apprentice," answered Sheremi. "I must hasten, sentry. My son is ill, and already my work has kept me too long from him." "May the Starry One send him rest," yawned the sentry absently. "Good night." Out of sight, around the curving wall, Mara pressed the woman's hand in silent thanks, then flung off the heavy draperies and stuffed them into the basket. Sheremi took them and went her way, while Mara, feeling fleet as air in her own thin Egyptian sheath, sped toward the goldsmith shop, across the street to the dark entrance, and straight into the arms of Nakonk. "Hi," he growled, seizing her as if he never meant to let go. "So I've snared you at last, my bird on a wing, and this time I'll wager you'll not slip away from—" Mara clapped a hand over his mouth. "Nakonk, you're the very one I want. Oh, Ammon, how glad I am to see you. Quick, quick to the river. We must find a boat. They're going to raid the tavern. Make haste, I tell you." "They're what? Who?" Nakonk was moving beside her. Even while he protested, he kept firm grip on her arm as quickly as she could. Mara explained, meanwhile tugging him on through the dark streets. "I know not when they started, even if they've started, but there's a chance we may get there first. They had soldiers to call together, orders to give. The devourer take you. Will you hurry? Cease your pulling back." "I mean to stand still," said Nakonk bluntly, and did so. "Let me set my teeth into this. Nay, stop tugging at me. It'll do you no good. Now tell me why I should believe a word of this wild tale, when not an hour ago—" "Asked, I know, I tricked you, Nakonk. I had to. You'd not have listened if I tried to. In the name of Ammon, would I be going to the tavern at all if it weren't to warn them? You know well how they feel toward me at this time. Unless you hasten, it's you who'll betray them. You who'll murder them one by one." "So be it. Hush, hush. No need to shriek at me." Nakonk was moving now, raking the riverbank with his glance as they ran down the slope. "Mind you, I don't say I believe you, but I'll take no chances on—" "None of your tricks, though, Miss Blue Eyes. You'll not get out of my sight. From now to Crete, do you understand? By Ammon, I think I'll tie a hawser to you and make certain— Here's a boat. We'll borrow it now and ask leave some other." "Nakonk, listen." Both of them froze. In the act of climbing in the boat, somewhere back in the dark maze of streets, there was a sound of rhythmic footsteps, a barked order, the clank of weapons. "They're coming," gasped Mara. Make haste, make haste. Now, do you believe me?" For answer, Nakonk shoved her into the boat, tumbled in after her, and pushed off with a stroke of such violent energy that it seemed to take them halfway across the Nile. Grim and silent, he devoted all his attention to keeping the boat moving at a speed Mara would have marveled at any time but now. Now, no matter how fast they went, the boat seemed to crawl. Her gaze was fastened fearfully on the receding riverbank. "There they are," she cried. "I can see them, Nakonk. They'll take that ferry barge, I'll wager. It's the only craft big enough to hold them all." "Hurry, hurry." The barge was well past the middle of the river when the little boat bumped the wharf on the east bank. Nakonk tied the painter in an instant and scrambled up the water-soaked ladder, pulling Mara behind him. Together, they plunged into the gloomy alleys of the waterfront district. "You must tell them, Nakonk. I dare go in," panted Mara as they ran. "They'll believe you." "And where will you be," he snapped, "if I let you slip away again?" "Oh, what do I matter now? Put your wits to work, Captain. If I live to reach Crete, it's more than I hoped for anyway." Nakonk flung open the gate, and they halted, breathless. "I'll wait," gasped Mara. "I swear I'll wait. They're in the corner." Nakonk loosed her arm at last and sprinted for the door. Stumbling to the farthest, darkest corner of the courtyard, Mara huddled there, trying to catch her breath and listening for the clatter of weapons in the street beyond. She heard them all too soon, but before that she heard Nakonk's voice in the tavern, followed by scrambling activity, then the sound of the rear door banging open and soft, hasty footsteps scattering in all directions. They were still hurrying stealthily by her on the other side of the courtyard wall when the heavy ones, the bold ones, pounded up the street. Naught holds me here, thought Mara, shrinking against the wall. I could climb up these vines and be over the wall and away. But she did not move. She had told Nakonk she would wait, and just once in her life, she meant to do what she said. She could hear the swords clanging now, and the panting, and see the orange glow of torchlight over the wall yonder on the buildings across the street. Nakonk, come, she thought, make haste. And there he was at last. In the doorway, beckoning to her, she darted out of her corner, and the first soldier burst at that moment through the gate. In the name of the Queen! A hoarse voice bellowed. Mara flung herself back. Nakonk vanished, and the raiders poured into the courtyard. Gods of Egypt, they are everywhere. Mara was thinking as she flattened herself against the vines, swarming over the courtyard like angry bees, dashing into the tavern and through it, shouting, cursing, and from the sound of it, breaking every piece of crockery Miftaya owned. Some ran out back. She could hear them beating about the alleys, calling to one another, growling their fury that for the second time that night their prey had eluded them. Mara found herself laughing silently, clutching the vines in wild excitement. They all went free. She exulted. You son of crocodiles. They all slid through your claws. Every one. Then a light glared in her face. Who's that? Cried a voice. Asked, I found one at least. Come out of there. A rough hand dragged her forth. Look you, it's a maid. A maid? Echoed another voice, one she knew. She twisted about to face Chadzar the Libyan. By the sacred horns of Hathor, he exploded, what kept spirited you out of the palace, with a guard at the door and every sentry warned? Mara loosed her held-in laughter. It rang clear and mocking and triumphant through the courtyard and the empty inn. You daughter of 40 devils, spat the Libyan, grabbing for his whip. I'll teach you to laugh at me. From long habit, Mara flung an arm over her face, half crouching. The first savage, similar bite of the lash, quenched her laughter. As she gasped under the second and the third and the fourth, she knew her 30 short days of freedom were at an end. When Mara walked into the great audience chamber of the Golden House, weary, sore, with hands bound tight behind her, it seemed a different room for the one she had entered the morning of Anani's audience with the Queen. Now, soldiers instead of courtiers stood in groups about it, and torches blazed on every wall, throwing dancing, dazzling reflections over the dais and the electrum throne, which stood tall and empty, awaiting its occupant. Not gentle Anani, but Chadzar stood beside Mara, whip in hand, and no Lord Shefdu lounged with deceptive laziness in the background, ready to throw her a glance of encouragement or devise a way out. Instead, there was Senmut, the architect, hazily summoned from his bed and walking in low tones with his brother Nahara. And there was no way out. Count Setmut's ravaged face showed a fierce elation. He kept looking over his shoulder toward the door leading to the Queen's private apartments. I made her summons urgent, Mara heard him murmur, and we'd best wait. She'll want to do the questioning herself, Emin. What luck is this? Now perhaps that cursed affair of the bodyguard will be forgotten. Her radiance has shown me naught but the edge of her tongue these last few days, I must confess. You say the slave girl's your only capture? But she's enough, provided she'll speak truth. Senmut glanced at Mara, his cheeks furrowing with a faint, contemptuous smile. There are ways to ensure that. Mara heard him as from a great distance. None of this seemed quite believable. Disasters had fallen in such a deadly rain that she felt dazed by now. The night seemed to have been going on forever, like a chaotic dream. Only the fresh welts across her shoulders were vividly real. They throbbed without ceasing, each stripe separately, like crisscrossed bands of fire. I have grown soft, she thought, or else this Libyan's hand is heavier than Zasha's ever was. There was a sudden stir among those who stood nearest the inner door. Now we'll see, breathed Setmut with satisfaction. He crossed the room quickly. The soldiers effaced themselves against the wall, and the Libyan gave Mara a shove which sent her sprawling on her face, unable to catch herself because of her bound wrists. The whole company dropped to her knees as the door swung open. Behold, intoned the chambers, the majesty of the Black Land, horse of gold, enduring the kingship splendid of diadems, ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt. Enough, rang Hatshepsut's high metallic voice, accompanied by the whisper of her sandals across the floor. I care not for ceremony in the middle of the night. Count Setmut, what, I pray you, is of such a vast importance that I be roused from my couch at this hour? Move that cursed cushion. I like it not. Mara lay tensely quiet, intensely aware. Everything was real now, too real. Her shoulders burned with fresh pain for her wrenching fall, and the architect's soothing tones turned her sick with dread. Your radiance will scarce regret the loss of a little sheep when you hear my news. I have this night, with some help from my esteemed brother Lord Nehera, struck the death blow at a conspiracy against your enduring majesty's throne in person. The very conspiracy, in fact, that we have long suspected to be in progress under the secret direction of your kinsman, the Pretender. Fewer words, Count Setmut. Do you say you have caught the leaders? I see them not. Majesty, this wretched slave girl you see before you? She is the leader? You ask me, said the queen waspily, to believe that tale? Shining One, my tale is not yet told, retorted Setmut. When you see the face of this wench, pull her up there. Mara felt the Libyan's rough grasp. The next instant she was on her knees, looking straight into the glittering dark eyes of Hatshepsut. The queen's face was as beautiful as before, perhaps more so, for this time its femininity was not mocked by the tied-on ceremonial beard and the massive severity of the double crown. Confined only by a Nero golden circlet bearing the royal cobra, her hair fell loose about her shoulders, and she wore a flowing dressing gown instead of robes of state. Blue eyes, she remarked. Where have I seen this girl before? Daughter of the sun, she is the Canaanite's interpreter and one of our own spies. By my father the god, explained the queen, leaning forward. She's dared deceive us? Exactly, your radiance, and if you will allow my tale to proceed. The queen leaned back, still staring at Mara. Go on, she ordered. And so the tale was told, with all the eloquence and subtle emphasis on his own cleverness of which Count Setmut had made himself master through long years of courting the favor of his queen. Mara listened with growing astonishment, scarcely able to recognize the happenings she knew so well. Nehera was scarcely mentioned. The soldiers and Seher dismissed with a shrug. It became clear that Count Setmut alone, inspired by his pure and lifelong devotion to the Radiant One, had solved the whole riddle in a flash of genius, conducted the raid single-handedly, and desired naught for reward save the smile of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was beginning to smile. Prince of serpents, thought Mara, almost in awe. It was this same sly, persuasive tongue which for years had twisted all reports into the shape of what Hatshepsut wished to hear, a hymn to her own glory. It was these fluidly gesturing hands, as much as the slim, beringed ones resting on the arms of the throne, which maneuvered the destiny of Egypt and her helpless thousands. The Black Land might perish under taxes or the sword of an enemy, so long as these two gained their ends. Behold, that which men dreaded now exists, thought Mara. The old prophecy of Neferuhu was forming in her mind. Foes are in the east, and Asiatics descend into Egypt, and no protector hears. The land is diminished, its rulers multiplied. Little is the corn, great is the corn measured. yet it must be measured to overflowing. You, slave, the queen's voice sliced through her thoughts. You may address my majesty. Have you heard the charges made against you by his excellency? Radiant one, whispered Mara. Do you deny them? Nay, I do not deny them. What am I saying, she thought instead of panic. I must deny them somehow. You used your position as interpreter to hold private converse with my half-brother, the pretender, who bore messages from him to the rabble at his inn, whom he calls his followers? And you were aware as you did this that you were assisting a plot against my sacred majesty and the throne of Egypt? Nay, I knew it not. I knew not what I did. I was bewitched, your majesty. It was as in a dream. I knew only that I must go to the inn, but I did not even understand the words I spoke there. I moved as one under a spell. I swear it was so. His Highness, your brother, bewitched me. Lies, cut in Nahara contemptuously. None could bewitch that maid. She's half kept herself. She knew what she did. I've no doubt of it, said Hatshepsut. Come, girl, this babble will gain you naught. You bore messages and assisted in treason against me. However, is it possible I might spare your life if you show yourself helpful now? Name me the leader of the plot. The moment had come. Mara's lips parted and her heart suddenly began to pound against her ribs. I do not know him, Majesty, she whispered. You do not know him? The queen seemed not able to believe what she had heard. Then her eyes narrowed with fury. Do you dare defy me? Answer at once, before I have your tongue slit. Who is your leader? I do not know him. There was an incredulous silence. Then Count Setmut spoke harshly. Perhaps, your majesty, she has forgotten. You, Libyan, refresh her memory. Chadzar scrambled off his feet and plied his whip with a will. 1, 2, 3 lashes blazed across Mara's back, already striped with welts. Who is your leader? Repeated Hatshepsut. Trying with difficulty to catch her breath, Mara said, I tell you, I know him not. Asked, it is the daughter of Set himself that you have brought me, Senmut, breathed the queen, white-faced. Question this slave. I will not speak to her again. I hear and obey, your radiance. The furrows of his smile carved deep into the architect's face as he left his place beside the throne and advanced upon Mara. I advise you, he rapped out, to answer me while you're able. Who is your leader? I do not know him. Double your strokes, Libyan. Again the crack of the lash sounded in the room 4 times, 6 times, 5 times, 6. Through a blur of pain, Mara heard, though relentless voice again, who is he? Slowly but stubbornly, Mara shook her head. She heard Chadzar swearing at her under his breath. The architect rapping out, double the strokes again. Mara gasped in protest, then in agony as the lash bit through the linen of her dress and laid open the skin beneath. She felt the linen tear away from her back, heard the whine of the next stroke, and tried to brace herself for it. But the lash was living fire now, and each blow tore through her flesh. She could not brace herself. She could only retch helplessly, trying to twist away from the remorseless whip and grow sicker, dizzier. Stay a moment, cried Hatshepsut. Call off your Libyan ape, Nahara. He'll kill the girl and will be no wiser than before. You slave, up on your knees and listen to me. Can you hear what I say? The room was whirling, and the voice seemed to whirl too. But after a moment, splashes of light appeared through the hazy darkness, swam into focus, and resolved themselves into the torches. Mara felt herself pulled to her knees. Senmut was repeating the queen's request impatiently. Can you hear her majesty? Mara nodded, sick with the smell of blood and the taste of it on her lips when she tried to moisten them. Listen well then, ordered Hatshepsut. I will spare you all further punishment for your crime if you will answer the question. More than that, I will free you from slavery and give you 50 gold to bend and a silver chain. Think, only a word or two and you will walk out of this room a free maid, with gold in your sash and your life before you. Gold and freedom? thought Mara dimly. Once I wanted those things above all else. Majesty, she whispered again, I do not know the leader. Nahara's cold voice broke the heavy silence which followed. Your Radiance, is it barely possible she speaks truth? The informant I discovered and questioned told me of a certain scribe who interested me much. It is said he alone knows the leader. I did not believe this, but if I might put a question. Do so, snapped Hatshepsut. Nahara turned to Mara. Answer me, insolent one, or I'll call back the Libyan. Do you know this Sashai? Ay, I know him. Who is he then? Sashai, that is the only name I know. Liar, you know him well. Well indeed, according to that juggler. Was it not he who warned you when his own followers would have killed you? Eh? And was it not he who risked your own neck to save you? He and others. What others? Mara was silent a moment, then she said, those like myself. And who is so worthless as yourself, pray? What babble is this? You could not understand, thought Mara, even if I told you. You did not know those others, but I know them. Son of Set, Nakonk and Asher and Niftaya and Nefer, and the temple priests and the fishermen on the Nile and the goldsmith and carpenters and potters and stonecutters going home from their work in the city of the dead, and their friends and kin, they are the others. She understood Anani's story now. They were her friends and kin, the only ones she had. They were Egypt. I do not do this for the king, she thought in wonder. I do it for Egypt. Still silent, hissed Nahara furiously. By Ammon, these rebels are madmen, all of them. Chadzar, come forth again. Oh, Ammon, I cannot stand another lashing now, thought Mara. Not yet. I must have time, a little time. Wait, she choked. I will tell you something, all I know. I have heard them say that he is not a scribe, this Sashai, but a sculptor, one who has worked on the great temple under the cliff. But I do not know his name, I swear it. If that is so, I can find him easily enough, put in Count Senmut. He stepped closer to Mara. Describe him. He is short, not much above my height, with heavy shoulders and a girth it would take 2 lashes to go around. He wears a curled wig and has a scar on his chin. Senmut straightened slowly, his eyes drooping with disbelief. I do not recall such a man among my crew of sculptors, but I know him well. He is as I say. The queen's scornful laughter cut through her protest. I think it is her fear of the lash that speaks, Senmut, not her memory. Is there no way to test this without sending to the city of the dead to rouse all the sculptors and thieves from their crouches and drag them here? I know a way, Your Radiance, said Lord Nahara. He walked past Mara to the main doors of the room and muttered something to a soldier, who hurried out. Returning, Nahara remarked, It will be but a moment, Your Majesty. As for you, girl, if you've not spoken truth this time, I hope you've made your peace with the gods. How can he find out so surely, so soon, thought Mara. He's bluffing. There's no... Then she remembered the juggler. She sank back on her heels and let her head drop, her raw and aching shoulders turning to a mass of fire in protest against even that slightest movement. She was still dizzy with the pain of it when she heard the door behind her open and the sound of someone falling to his knees. Then Lord Nahara's cold voice. Here's our testing stick. Here's our testing stick, Your Radiance. Come forward, juggler. Pharaoh would question you. The twisted, strangely graceful body glided past the corner of Mara's eye. The queen's voice rang in her ears. You may speak to Your Majesty, juggler. I want the truth for once. Is the man called Sasai a short man full of girth, with a curled wig and having a scar on his chin? Sashai? Echoed Sahur, and Mara's aching flesh quivered under the amusement in his tone. Your eternal radiance, I would scarce describe him so, since he is tall and of strength like a tree trunk, and without visible blemish. A young man he is, somewhat homely of countenance, though this beraggled lily here found him handsome enough, I dare say. Ammon, deliver me from this wretch of a slave, gasped the queen, almost transformed by her fury. She has done naught but lie, naught but defy my majesty, you, Libyan. Hatshepsut rose from her throne, and her voice rose to a shriek. Come forward and teach this riffraff who it is she defies. Lay on, do you hear me? Beat her, beat her, beat her. Chadzar was obeying already, and his blows grew heavier with every scream of his infuriated pharaoh. But the screams grew dim in Mara's ears. She swam for a few endless moments in a sea of fire, then faded slowly into a sea of black where there was no pain. That concludes chapter 23 of Mara, Daughter of the Nile.